I'm getting interested in theology again. With fascists taking over the country, a lot of my time and energy has been spent thinking how to defeat the next Hitler. But I am nostalgic for the early days of the internet when God was being discussed. I do find theology fascinating from both ends, and I wanted to see if any new arguments regarding God and subsequent rebuttals by atheists have been made. I encountered an interesting rebuttal that made me stop and think for a moment regarding the argument from contingency. An infinite regress might be impossible, but what if time is cyclical? For a repetition of time and space to occur, there needs to be a cycle, sequence, or set that precedes it, and this creates an infinite regress, which, as noted, is impossible. A retrocause also creates an infinite binary regress. Nonetheless, it gave me pause. Another one is, doesn't God have to think sequentially? It's not exceptionally new. I heard it in a debate a few years back, but it's a good one. God isn't temporal. Therefore, it would be a mistake to think that he thinks the same way we do, just as it would be a mistake to think robots process information in the same way the human brain does. Yet Hegel shows that for a concept to exist, you need an antithesis and a synthesis in the initial thesis. This doesn't have to emerge sequentially. It can emerge simultaneously. In fact, if there was a temporal loop, the alternate explanation of the universe, that too would be a composite of space-time, as well as whatever mechanism that allowed it to repeat itself. So it seems the ultimate reality, be it God or a temporal loop, we are faced with a composite of some sort. Just as space cannot exist without time and energy, so God's thinking must be a synchronized process. Now, what evidence is there for God isn't the notion of the metaphysical possible. What would it even look like? There is a stress here, but it's not on logic. The pain you're feeling is on your imagination. You are a temporal physical being trying to contemplate the transcendent. Like the analogy I've made many times, trying to explain sound to somebody born deaf. There's nothing illogical about God any more than there's something illogical about color or music. It's just that we can't comprehend it. Whereas infinity is a logical impossibility because an infinity cannot be surpassed by definition. It can only exist hypothetically, never literally. Nobody will ever discover that last number of pi. As I know, as is the notion that from nothing comes nothing, since you'd be trying to impregnate zero and thereby change the definition of nothingness. The last offense would be maybe there's some explanation we haven't thought of. But if you make that argument, you'd be very desperate, and I think showing it to any neutral individuals. If you can deny you can deny anything. As René Descartes showed, you can deny reality itself, and thereby every idea science promotes. It's why in a court of law, we say beyond a reasonable doubt, not just beyond doubt, which is impossible. If all the evidence somebody committed a murder was arranged and the person's defense was that some possibility might exist that would explain everything, would that seem reasonable to you as a jury member? Would you let him back on the streets on the off chance that the evidence could be explained, even though it wasn't? Now, supposing we are allowed to move on from here, how do we address that what the metaphysical is and its interaction with the physical world? Einstein believed in Spinoza's God, or at least gave it some credence. He didn't think there was a clear split, but rather one gave way to the other, and that makes sense coming from the man who discovered space-time, the space-time continuum. I agree, because if we are to assert that from nothing comes nothing, and that's an important precedent in the argument for God's existence, then we can't turn around and say God created the universe from nothing. If so, why invoke God at all? If the universe can come from nothing, let's leave God be and just assert that. So, I don't see a distinction. Rather, I think the metaphysical becomes physical like ice becomes water. But this process is imperceptible to us. Imagine for a moment a desert people who've never seen ice, only water. They don't know, and could never know, the transformative property of water, although they do have knowledge of water. It's conceivable to me that long into the future, we may stumble upon the metaphysical. I think that would be an interesting science fiction book. But I hate religious people who use the God of the gaps and posit supernatural for any mysterious occurrence. I refer to my Do Ghosts Exist video. I don't like a lot of the organized religions. The mad, bad, or God dilemma is a false one. The truth that is that the resurrection is a ghost story, and like Thomas Paine said, is founded on hearsay. There are 3 ways to determine truth, so far as I am aware: mathematics, formal logic, and the scientific method. You'll notice nowhere did I say looking up Bronze Age myths. Near-death experiences are also silly when you investigate them. A lot of so-called remarkable claims that people make are unverified. If they were, the scientific community would publish them. Unless you hypothesize an improvable bias or conspiracy. Scientists do tend to be secular, but that's because, science doesn't offer much evidence of God. Neither does it offer much evidence of life on other planets. So I'm not saying that indicates anything. Statistically, life on other planets and God, as I just explained through the argument from contingency, most definitely exist. God is in fact a little more likely, since while life on other planets should exist, given the vastness of the universe, it's not impossible to assume they don't, whereas it's illogical to suggest an infinite regress. Going back to the temporal loop, I don't think it's wrong. In fact, an infinite series of cycles could exist, but there does have to be something metaphysical begetting and sustaining it. This is all rather Buddhist in conclusion, though with a Western argument beginning it. I kind of like this universal view, as it incorporates everything like a buffet. Some might be hesitant, lest they be psychoanalyzed and accused of believing in something because they want to, but that's Bulverism. You can enjoy your discoveries as long as you show your arithmetic and logic. There's nothing wrong with taking satisfaction in what you think.